Most Muslims really believe that if you pray, fast, and check off all the religious boxes, your mind will naturally align with your faith. But that is not true, because the operating system of our mind today is built on secular, emotional, and reactive foundations, even though we think we're being Islamic. After studying under scholars for 2 years, doing tadabbur of the Quran almost daily, if not weekly, for the past 8 years, and finishing over 100 books, and yet still feeling like something was off. I realized this when I posted this one video, which got over 29,000 views, but what I completely did not expect was the emotional reactions within the comments that revealed what was really going on within Muslim minds. So in this podcast, I'm going to break down how indoctrination actually disguises itself as preference, and why this mismatch is quietly keeping you spiritually exhausted, mentally drained, and physically stuck because you can't get into action. You can't do the habits that you intend on doing. My account's name is IU Habits, but I realize that the mentality and the faith part is actually what is keeping people stuck. That is about 80%. That is where everything starts. But the action part is just a natural byproduct. So without further ado, let's get started. So there was this one study that is actually in the American Psychological Association. So in the study, they had two groups. They had the neutral group, in which they gave them just generic words, while the other one, they had scrambled sentences. They had elderly stereotypical words such as wrinkled, retired, old, Florida. And after they gave them these words, they did the task of making them walk down the hallway. And those who were primed stereotypically elderly words were significantly slower than the control group. Those who were elderly primed walked at a speed of 8.28 seconds, while the neutral group walked at a speed of 7.3. So this is exactly what they found. People's actions can be automatically influenced by social stereotypes and concepts, even without them being aware or it being intentional. So the video that I made that had the 28,000 views was about, after you make the du'as and stuff, what are you supposed to do? What are the action steps that you can get into? And in the comment sections, there were girls talking about specific when it comes to like the exact height of the man that they wanted, the skin color, the eye color. And I said, just be careful of doing this, specifically because it's not Quranic. Like, it's not how the Quran teaches you how to make du'a. And a lot of people would say, that's no biggie. That's just what they prefer. But this is actually indoctrination, because I talk about systems, so let me define it for you. Preference is when you choose freely what you like and believe after thinking about it and after being exposed to multiple different options. While indoctrination is when the belief is pushed upon you so strongly that you don't even realize that there are other options. So the main difference is that preferences come from your own judgment, while indoctrination actually comes from someone else's control. So let me give you an example, especially when it comes to marriage, right? We're having such a big crisis when it comes to marriage. When you come into this world, you don't know anything. In a closed system, there is no advertisement, there is no traveling. Your preference of the type of person that you want to end up with are those who are around you. Now in the modern world, right, after airplanes specifically, right, we had ships and boats, that was normal. But people can relocate from one location to the next one overnight, right? Have a new home, learn a new language because you got all of these apps. So this is an open system in which there isn't really any way to control it. What is happening now, as soon as you're born into this type of society, you are influenced by the TV that you watch, the actors that Hollywood, that Disney Channel chose, the movies that you watch, the classmates that you have, especially which is dependent on the parents, if they can afford to live in that neighborhood. So now it becomes very economically tied. It's not just things happening. This is not natural. It is because of the society that's around you. So a quick side note, I was talking to one of my doctors. Her son had an Ethiopian girlfriend. So she was like, she looks like you. And I wish I had an Ethiopian, in-law. They are African American and they're doctors, which means that they had a lot of money. But her son said to her, you put us in a private Christian school with only white people. Who did you think that we were actually going to end up dating? You're not only taught what to like because of the environment that you grow up in, but you're also taught what is possible and what's not an option, just because of the environment that you are raised in. And that is how systems influence whether it's indoctrination or preference. So in this case, that's not a preference. It's indoctrination. And trust me, okay, I had to learn this the hard way. Thankfully, I learned it young enough that when the option of my husband did come in front of my face, I was like, oh, you know what? I know what my values are. What do I want? It's not what the stereotypical looks and all of that stuff. It wasn't that. What kind of life do I want to live? What kind of person do I want? And I was able to work with that. So what I just explained to you is from the modern secular point of view. Like in the Western world, everybody wants to find the one. And we do have a similar issue within the Muslim kind of Islamic thought point of view. So I'm going to explain that real quick because that's what I do, right? We need to look at it from both angles because especially as Westerners, and this is mostly I'm making it for people who are living in the UK, US, Canada, Australia, okay? Because we're living in two worlds. They're intersecting at the same time. How do we deal with these differences? So when we come at it from the Islamic thought point of view, there's a completely different hierarchy. And that starts with Allah and his rulings, and then the Prophet ﷺ's teachings, and then your preferences. Now, this gets very complicated because at a certain point when it comes to religion, indoctrination, it's often associated with religion. So how do we deal with that? So let me explain to you how that happens and how you can differentiate between the two. If you're wondering how I learned all of these things and what I'm learning it from, I learn it from experts. What I do is I deduce. I take two worlds and I do a top, bottom up. So I learn it from the Islamic point of view, and then I clear my mind and I learn it from just nature and other experts, and I tie it back and make sure that they are in alignment because truth is truth no matter how you flip it. So I have a knowledge hub in which I have all of the details of all the books that I read. I categorize them in every single section of life. It's not just Islamic, and I think we have a big problem with that, but also your mental health. People have researched this who are in other communities. We need to learn from them, as well as financial help, as well as relationship. What do you do with kids? How do you have a good relationship with your spouse? How do you get a spouse? With your space also, especially now that we are in a very capitalist consumerist economy, how do you deal with things? How do you love people and not things, right? All of these different aspects, it's very complicated, but there's a lot of experts out there and they hide all the good things in books. And it's really hard to find books that align with your values. So I created this knowledge hub. It has over 100 resources and I update it at least annually. So if you want it, make sure to check out the link below. So when it comes from the Islamic angle, how do we confuse indoctrination with preference? So let me give you an example real quick. So I went through this myself. If you grew up and you were always taught the sunnah of wudu, right? In which you have to wash up 3 times this, 3 times that, you have to be very particular with every single part of the body. I'll talk about this in other parts. Well, I talk about other schools of thought in which, if you're a madhabi especially, this is a huge thing. Very meticulous with every single movement. Now, this is a sunnah, but a lot of people do not realize that the fard of wudu is actually just 4 parts. I posted about this to make people's lives easier, and one woman said, I showed this to my mom, and my mom freaked out. I was like, why are you telling me that? It's not my fault. She doesn't know. Anywho, moving on. But when life gets hard, right? You have medical issues, you can't keep a wudu due to childbirth, in which, I went through 3, and you have surgery, maybe you work in a doctor's office, right? So at this point, the sunnah of wudu, which you have learned, which has been indoctrinated from a very young age as though it was the requirement of wudu, you are keeping on to that. This is habitual, right? You're keeping on to that, but your life stage right now is saying, it ain't doing that. And Islamic history-wise, right, do we have these rulings? Because they were having these issues during the Sahaba's time. This is not like a new thing. So when they were at war, they had to trade off. They had to be on their horses and pray because they didn't have time. So life has intersected from the beginning when it comes to the requirements of the religion. So once you go to do it, and I had this feeling as well, it feels wrong. It feels so wrong. Maybe you're new to fiqh and you don't understand the nuances of it and you don't want to make a mistake, which is honest for a lot of people who don't have that kind of education. But mostly it's something habitual. It's your body, it's your mind, it's your soul. It just got used to it over the course of the years. But the law says it's okay. It says it's okay. Just a side note, but in that case, the fard or the requirement is that you make your prayers. But if you're using the fact that you have habitually learned that you have to do all of these sunnahs as an excuse for not doing the requirement, then that's where you realize that it's indoctrination, by the way. So, it's habitual. You're choosing your nafs over the requirement. With Islam, it works kind of differently, especially because we get a lot of misinformation. And over the past 14 years, this is something that I really had to learn because you can get trapped in either the secular world or in the religious world. And it's really hard to balance it unless you are literally learning every single day. And that's what I do. That's why I created the Knowledge Hub, because you will not see me a week without reading. Absolutely not. Not in this world. If you've ever sat down with scholars or somebody who's smarter than you and learned, one of the biggest things that you will learn is that when you're young, you are hot-headed. You will get mad about everything else, but it's humility that you learn. And that's one of the biggest things that I think is missing. And why studying under scholars is so important, because they don't just give you the knowledge, they also give you the mannerisms and how you're supposed to be going about this, right? A lot of people have made religion a mental exercise. It's about knowledge. We go to these conferences, we do these things, but it's about the heart. It's about spirituality. We're not talking about things that are legit that we can see in front of us. We're talking about the unseen. So I hope that this was helpful, and I hope that you take a minute to actually look into your life and see if what is holding you back is your beliefs. It is going to be your beliefs. And these beliefs come out of multiple angles, especially in the modern world. It could be coming from the secular angle about what you can and cannot do, and that's what I love talking about on this podcast and why I'm bringing it back, as well as from the religious angle. We get played a lot, especially a lot of converts who come in. They really think it's one angle, and then they realize how complicated it is, not because of the religion itself, but because of the systems that we live in, because there is 1400 years and nobody talks about this. So that's what I want this podcast to be. And if you want me to keep on doing this, because it's hard, I just had a newborn, go ahead and subscribe. But also, if you want to support more, if you want these kind of podcasts consistently, I have the link below. You can get a free course included by it. I don't believe in donation, okay? You have to give something for it. You'll be the first one to know about the podcast release, and you'll get a private link to make any sort of request for podcasts. I'm not going to do every single one. There's some things that shouldn't be talked about publicly, but I want to make sure that this is for you, that we talk about topics that you care about. The next podcast is going to be a deeper view on quantum physics and how it's related to Islam. And I'm not going to be talking about all of the proofs that a lot of people do. What I want to talk about is about Islamic history and world history. We only see one side of the world, right? But when those two connect, how are these theories and these sciences, how are they interconnecting? And how can that enlighten us actually? So if you want to continue supporting this, make sure to stick around. And until next time, peace.